So thanks for joining our September maturity model for 365 practitioners call. I've actually done zero work for this, so I probably shouldn't talk through any of this, but I figured we should at least get things rolling since I've got the slides. So if you haven't joined us before, this is a monthly call that we do to talk about the ever-expanding maturity model for Microsoft 365, which a small group of us has been working on for several years now. And we're always interested in your thoughts and your ideas. It's open source, so you can contribute, and we'll talk about how in a minute. So today's agenda, we'll talk a little bit about the current state of the maturity model and what its purpose is. We'll do, of course, because it's a PNP sharing is caring call, we'll do a picture in together mode so that we can use it for our publicity and such. We'll talk about how you can contribute this year, and then we'll get to the topic of accessibility. If you would like to join us every month, that calendar invite is the recurring calendar series. So you could add that to your calendar, and you'll have the events through the rest of the year. I believe that will take you to. All right, Simon Hudson, your name is on this slide. Why don't you go ahead and go through?
Oh no, not again.
Since I've done nothing.
Well, just bear with me 1 second while I finish pinging the link over to Donna and Sharon, just in case they're having where the heck's the link.
Good morning, Donna. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, there we go. Now I'm happy.
Hey.
Right. Well, I should abandon that attempt. Fantastic. I'm off the hook. Right. Terrific.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out how to join the call. I'm like, where's the join Teams thing? Oh, it's in this link. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to send you both. So
it's a technology problem.
Yeah, I thought it is. So we're sitting at around 10 or a dozen different competencies now. The approach we've taken with the 365 maturity model is to look at a set of what we're terming business competencies. So this is not about technology per se. It's about the business capabilities that organizations need in order to run a good business. And we've split them out arguably arbitrarily, but I think that most of these will resonate with most people into a set of business skills. And they cover things like collaboration and content management, which will be very familiar to people in the Microsoft world, and perhaps some things which are a bit more sort of more current thinking around things like people and communities and staffing and training that sort of more touch on the things that Microsoft are doing around, say, Viva at the moment. We've got a bunch of stuff around governance, risk and compliance. We've relatively recently published the cognitive business competency, which is really about thinking about how AI and machine learning should be adopted within organizations and things like responsible AI and what mature capabilities in that space looks like. So these are all different set of competencies. They sometimes overlap, and that's completely allowed. It's almost inevitable. They have a completely consistent structure. And you can get at them on the Microsoft Learn site. And the idea is you'd read through these effectively from the bottom up, the bottom being level 100, which is the we're quite rubbish level, and we'll see a bit more about that in a moment, up to what does great look like and how far towards great are we, and how far towards great do we want to be. So that's the competencies. We then have a number of supporting articles and tools. Not as comprehensive, arguably, but some pragmatic advice in the How to Elevate document set. So this is the way you can achieve this set of things in collaboration, for example, is by doing these things in your organization and with the technologies that Microsoft make available. And then there are some quite useful tools for how would you run a Microsoft maturity model workshop, for example. So that's the document set. Let's grab the next slide. Oh, I can do that. Yeah, it's live. So here are those maturity levels. Again, most of you know these already, but for the newbies amongst us, level 100 is we don't really know what we're doing. We're just making it up as we go along. There's no process, there's no oversight, there's no consistency. We're just trying to figure out what's going on. Now, that might typify some startup organizations. that might typify the bad parts of some well-established organizations, bad parts. It might also typify sort of new ventures within a large organization where they go, we're going to start, I don't know, building solar panels, because that's topical, but we haven't done it before. So we're going to figure it out as we go along and learn. And so let's talk about that learning. As organizations realize that they're not as good at this stuff as they might like to be, they start to put in some process, some structure, all those good things, and they move up to level 200. And it's not great, but at least they're trying. And then when things start to be pretty reasonable, you know, those processes are working and they've had some tweakage, and people seem to have grasped the idea that they've got to be consistent and reliable, then you start to see organizations or parts of organizations and processes running at level 300. And then we go up from there. 300 and above is really great, best of breed type parts of the organization or organizations where people are optimizing what they do. They're using feedback of various types. They're doing constant reviews, continual professional development. All those kind of things are embodied in level 400 organizations. And by the time we get to level 500, and there are very few examples of this, level 500 are using things like statistical process control. They're using AI and automated feedback into their systems. They're actively engaging in the process of making themselves great, not just good. So those are the levels, and we've got these levels represented in all of the maturity model documents. And what they do is they let you benchmark yourself against other organizations, against some kind of arguable industry standard, if you want to claim that these are. Thank you. They definitely are words like company. They let you benchmark yourself, but more importantly, decide where do you want to be, and what else do you need to do to get there. So that's the Microsoft maturity model approach. And then what we do is we try and think about what else are we going to take on. And so we've got a number of additional competencies we're working on. They always take a lot longer than we think. We're also continually going back and looking at existing competencies and saying, how can we get better? And so the session today on accessibility, it sort of logically fits within part of the employee experience competency we're writing at the moment. But actually, it's one of those competency areas that can touch all sorts of things: business process and application design and collaboration and content management, and it reaches everywhere. So I'm really interested to see what Donna has to say in this session, because it might mean that we have to go back and rewrite or update or extend a whole bunch of competencies, and that's exciting. Right, do it, Mark. Next slide.
All right, so if you'd like to be part of our little animated fun that we always do here, is anyone ready to capture this? I'm not sure I am. Never very good at it.
I can capture that. I've got Camtasia.
Thanks, Simon. I've actually
2
lost
seconds.
the, how do I go to together mode? Did they move it again? There we go.
Yes, it's moved. It's under view.
It moved.
I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It used to be in that corner.
Yeah.
Now it's under view.
There we go. You look like a happy bunch.
Everyone look
wave.
excited.
Everybody learned some things. All right. Simon, you got that?
I have not got that. No, I've.
All right.
I have to change my bit as well, don't I? Sorry about that. Keep waving. It's not changing, unfortunately. Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's not changing.
Mark,
right.
if you want to stop sharing, you could pull your screen up. Maybe we could just record it and then clip it later.
That would be good.
Actually, yeah, we'll have this whole thing on a recording, so we should be fine. David will be able to pull it out.
Do a quick wave again, and I've got it this time.
All right.
This is how you applaud in sign language, by the way, what I'm doing with my hands right now.
How many people on a call does it take to come up with how to do this? And we've done this so many times I can't even tell you. So there you go. All right, next slide. So, Simon Doyle, do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, why not? Well, welcome back all. Hope you had lovely summers, by the way. So you can get involved. We'd love you to get involved. So please use your reactions to let us know that you're sort of still there with us, and bits that you find interesting. If you'd like to speak and have something to contribute, then just raise your hand and start talking. You can get involved with us and what we're doing here. So we'd love you to be involved. Give us feedback, thoughts, news, case studies. We're always looking for case studies and looking for new topics as well. So you can get involved by accessing, by speaking to us through GitHub, contributing on GitHub, and that's probably one of the best ways of getting to us, or by chatting to us on chat here, and we can continue the conversation after that. All the recordings are accessible via YouTube via the link below under mmvideos.m365.ms, and there's some links to content I'm running workshops there as well. Next slide. So we're sort of 3/4 of the way through the year. We've got another 2 sessions to go after this. We've got October 17th. I'm really looking forward to actually around SharePoint syntax, or Microsoft syntax, isn't it? So with Chris McNulty and Drew. So that's a really interesting one. And then somebody's doing a case study around sales processes and the maturity in their organization. And we've got Todd as well doing a session on GitHub accessibility. So join us for the next session on October the 17th. I look forward to seeing you there. Next slide, please. I thank you all for joining us back in, was it July? No, June, wasn't it? So thank you for joining us. Yeah, in June. I appreciate, we all appreciate you attending, and that was a really good session actually. And so thank you for that. And as I said before, the next session is October the 17th. Yeah, we look forward to seeing you there. Right, I think we're getting ready for the main event now, aren't we? I will hand over to, I think it's Sharon. I think, well, you've been heavily involved in this, so hand over to you, Sharon.
Hi, guys. Thanks for joining today. I'm really excited about this topic. I've always been passionate about this topic for all kinds of fun reasons. I was lucky enough when I was in learning digital technology and learning how to create web pages to have somebody in my program who was blind, who was actually a web developer. And then when I was in college, one of the people in my developmental psychology program was a quadriplegic, and I was her assistant kind of throughout the class to help her to be able to get what she needed for that program. And through those 2 experiences alone, I was made incredibly aware of the difficulties and the challenges that are faced when we don't think about people who are not like us, right? People who don't fit the mainstream, people who don't fit in the box, who have specific needs. And so from that point on, when I started teaching, especially SharePoint and other products, I would really focus on the accessibility needs. So anyways, it's really near and dear to my heart for people to understand this. So when we talked about doing it, I was really excited. I reached out to Donna and I was like, you are the woman in this space. And I was super excited when she said that she would love to join us for this. So I'm really excited to have her here to talk through this. So Donna, I'd love it if you'd maybe pop off mute and just go ahead and quickly introduce yourself, and then you are welcome to have the floor to talk through the next few slides.
Fabulous. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Dona Sarkar. I used to run the Accessibility Tech program at Microsoft up until yesterday, actually was my very last day doing it. I have now transitioned over to run the Copilot and AI extensibility story for Microsoft. What does that mean? It might affect some of you actually. So if you adopt a Copilot, let's say, right, M365 or Power Platform or whatever it is, and you realize this is interesting, but it would be way more interesting to reason over my own company's data and use more of our stuff. to co-pilot our stuff, right? That model is called extensibility. And there's many ways to extend a copilot. The one that you all may know is connectors, but we're building a plugin model, and I will be debuting it at Ignite November 15th. So if you care about that, tune in. Joining me today is my colleague, Eddie Leonard, Eddie, say hi.
Hi.
Thanks, Eddie. Eddie's taking over for me for customer engagement with enterprises for accessibility. He presented with me last year at Ignite on exactly this topic. Eddie has a 20-year career at a very large financial company all of you have heard of, and he came and joined Microsoft a few years ago to help bring some of that knowledge to us so we can build better products for enterprises that we may not understand deeply. So Eddie's going to be your contact going forward for all things accessibility. He also has a fun surprise to show you all at the end of my spiel. So do we want to go to the next slide, Sharon? Okay, so let's talk about the benefits of accessibility. One of the things that I learned when I first started doing this work is it's not just a legal thing. Everyone says, oh, we have to do accessibility because it's legally mandated. And while that is true in some countries, in some circumstances, the real benefit is that more people can do things. Like imagine if someone said, what if you could get 20% more efficiency in your company and 20% more employee happiness in your company by doing some very simple things? You would probably say, hell yeah, that sounds amazing. And that really is the big benefit of accessibility. You are empowering your employees and therefore your customers to have a better experience with your products and your services. So we've seen a lot of benefits to focusing on accessibility. Microsoft has been doing this, of course, for 15 plus years, but really an intense focus starting 2014 when Satya Nadella became CEO. It's a topic near and dear to his heart, as many of you may know, and he appointed our first chief accessibility officer, who is Jenny Leif-Lurie, both of mine and Eddie's boss. Now, we've noticed these 6 categories really show up in Microsoft's story since accessibility became main stage. First of all is just culture. We adopted a thing called Ability Hack, which is along with our big internal 1-week hackathon, which just finished last week. We have a big focus on Ability Hack. And the number of people who come and participate in hackathons devoted to accessibility is like half the company. Those are the number one thing that everyone flocks toward and creates interesting, innovative things for, because people actually really want to make innovative products. They just don't know how to do it or when to make time to do it. So Ability Hack becomes really useful. CSR, of course, corporate social responsibility. It's really good for the company's brand. It's good to do for the planet, empower everyone on the planet to do the thing. We mean every person on the planet. Third one is innovative thinking. One of the things I found very fascinating is that building accessible products is a creative activity. And a lot of times people say, oh, I want to work on something creative. I want to work on something out of the box. I want to work on something no one's done before. And usually that should be an accessibility problem because there's a huge demographic of people who are not being served enough by the technology that exists today. So why not use our brains to solve real problems? Like, those Silicon Valley bros who are like, my startup is going to be Uber for fresh fruit. We're going to have fresh fruit delivered to your house every day. We're like, is that a problem? How big is the TAM on that? How much money are you really going to make? It's not a real problem. They're smart people looking for a problem to solve. And you've seen a lot of tech hype cycles fall in there, right? Like cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. What is those little ape pictures? NFTs. These are all solutions looking for a problem. And accessibility is not it. It's a huge problem looking for more solutions. How can you empower more people with disabilities to have jobs that pay a lot of money and live freer and better lives? To me, that's a real problem to solve with our technical skills. So I've always found this space to be really fascinating. The fourth one is productivity and retention. It's proven, and all of you who run businesses and who work in businesses know that when you get your employees the right tools they need to be successful, they're successful, shockingly. I am dyslexic, and once Immersive Reader showed up in my life, I became just infinitely better. Infinitely better. I started being able to actually read documents, write documents, do all this. Ironically, not to be that girl, but AI has been a big transformation for me in productivity because I no longer need to read like the world's most boring document. I can just say summarize. And that to me is a game changer because for me, a dyslexic person to read let's say a 10-page document would take maybe an hour, and I would have to make sure that I read it right. For you, it might take 10 minutes. So it would take me solidly an hour and to process what I've read. But now I can summarize in a minute and figure out like what are the key moments and things.
Donna, you talk about productivity, right? So
Yeah.
think about that, right? More productivity equals what? It equals higher revenue. I mean, who in the heck does not want to make more money, right?
That's right. That's right.
Major benefit right there.
So who was it, Eddie? It was Accenture, right? Who did a big study that showed that companies who invest in accessibility have like 80% higher,
86% higher revenue. Yeah.
That's right. So Eddie's got all these stats and numbers that he'd be happy to share with you, but we've seen that over and over again. And I'll just point out, Microsoft started really focusing on accessibility in 2014. It's now 2023. See the stock price. It's not a coincidence, people. The fifth thing that's interesting to me is PR. You get a lot of good brand recognition and value. Like, for example, the only Super Bowl ads Microsoft has ever made are accessibility ads, Xbox controller, the adaptive kit, etc. They're only accessibility. And something very funny happened when that Super Bowl ad happened. People saw the little Microsoft logo at the bottom and said, oh, that's interesting. Brand recognition with a positive sentiment, and the sales of Azure went up. Like, how wild is that, right? These are not related. So it was a very interesting thing, accidental with PR, because whoever thought making an adaptive controller would be good for cloud services, but it really does work. And then the sixth one is differentiation. It does differentiate you from your organizations. Recently, we had people come in for interviews, and we talked extensively about the accommodation process in interviews. And we had the recruiter ask right away on the intake form, but also ask them in the interviews, what do you need? Do you need a sign interpreter? Because we can have that for you. Do you want captions on? Do you want the interviewers to know anything? And the candidate said, wow, I've never been asked so openly if I need any accommodations. And even the ones who didn't said, that is really cool. And it taught me something about basic things that I can put into practice in my own organization. So it does create a big differentiation factor. When I go, believe me, I was shocked when this happened. I went to a conference called Disability In, which is a big accessibility conference. Every company, I mean Google, I mean Amazon, I mean Apple, I mean all of them, people came up and said, you all do the accessibility the best in terms of culture. And I said, we do something the best? And these people are saying so? I was so shocked. The line to talk to us was 850 people. I've never seen anything like that. And I don't think I fully understood how much we do with accessibility until that moment. And this was just last year. And I was telling Eddie, like, we're really good at this, that we feel that we're not in the world. But I think that's a problem because the bar is not that high, that I think that what we do is pretty good. Maturity model, are we 5? Absolutely not. Are we like a 3.5? Probably. But the fact that there's no one doing a 5 in accessibility in the world, that is a problem. Because think about all of the people in the world who are not able to work up to their most potential because we just haven't set up the system. And I don't think of accessibility as a health problem. I think of it as a workspace design problem or like a tech design problem. And like all tech design problems, they're solvable by us. All right, Sharon, next slide. Okay, so when we think about accessibility in business, right, and what are all of the different competencies, it really does fall into all of these categories. And you can see that on, this left-hand column that I'm not going to attempt to read with my dyslexic little brain, you can see that it falls into all of these categories of products. And whether it's, governance risk, or whether it's cognitive services, or whether it's search, or, staffing and this and that, it falls into all of it. Accessibility is not one person's job in the company. We like to call it this hub and spoke model where finance says, okay, how much are we going to invest in accessibility? HR has the tools that they can deploy to employees. We, the central accessibility team, look at really product accessibility. That's the big thing we look at, and as well as our internal products, the things our employees use, like the time off tool, for example, very important. Latest, the travel tool is rolling out, a new travel tool, and that has called pandemonium throughout the land because we're like, is this accessible? I don't know. And poor Eddie is spending his life chasing it down to see, okay, does it work for colorblind friends? Which is, by the way, how many? 1 in 12 people in the company are colorblind.
Yeah.
So
1 in
that's
12.
a lot of people. So we don't know if it's a tool that someone built. We're deploying. We're like, oh, does this work? Chaos, right? But this is the kind of thing that becomes everyone else's problem. Of course, our products, you've heard about this many, many times, and we're going to actually share with you some of the stuff we do. But the thing to know about this is it feels like an overwhelming problem at first, but all of you run, very important businesses and you've done many maturity model scales. You don't do it all at once. So for example, this year we said, we're going to invest very, very heavily in product accessibility, specifically on AI products. And the reason for that is this, because these AI products are new. We have 121 co-pilots. I know everyone take a deep breath, especially me, who has to babysit them. And we want those co-pilots to be accessible from the beginning, because why would we disenfranchise people with disabilities from day one on AI products? Like, these aren't legacy. These aren't things that have been around for 20 years and it's hard to fix bugs of. No, we're turning that code today. So that code should be accessible today. That's one big focus area. The second big focus area are internal products, because what we don't want are our employees to be not able to do their job the best possible because of the work environment, right? That is just basically bad thing to do to your employees. And the third thing we're focusing on is taking everything we know and learn, packaging up and shipping it to customers so that they can build similar programs. And that is what Eddie's charter is. And he's going to share with you in a minute. So the thing to keep in mind is really figure out where you're at on your accessibility maturity journey. And that 500 level thing that you showed, like 500, 400, 300, that's a great scale. I promptly screenshotted that because I will be stealing that. But figure out where you're at and figure out which of these elements you're really going to focus on. And I recommend that every maybe half a year, you focus on one element, and that's it. Don't try to solve 6 things unless they're really related, but really focus on bringing up the maturity scale by half or 1 for one of those things. Sharon, your hand.
Sorry, I was going to applaud and my hand went up instead.
Okay, awesome. Next
Donna,
slide.
I'll, if you want, before you go to that slide, I can step in and talk a little bit about the maturity model stuff,
Please
right?
do.
So
Please.
you think about it, if you're just starting on your journal, like you've got level 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And obviously we kind of covered that in the earlier slide. As you're starting your journey, you want to kind of think, where do I need to focus first? And first and foremost, you got to start with people and culture, right? You want to get some executive sponsorship. You want to get executive buy-in. You want to get buy-in from all of your different areas, right? HR, you want to get buy-in from your development teams. That's where you kind of want to start. Because if you don't have that buy-in and that leadership saying, yeah, I'm on board with this, everything else is going to become more difficult. That's really where you want to start. Once you have that, then you can develop your vision and your strategy and start engaging with all the different teams. And of course, investment. That right up the front is getting that commitment from leadership and saying, yes, we are going to invest in that. And from there, you can start to build on standards, training, procurement, product development. All of those things will follow on after you get that buy-in from leadership. That's where you want to start.
That's exactly right. Getting buy-in from leadership is key, and bringing them into the process. Because it is showing the business value of accessibility and saying, hey, do you want to raise your revenue by 80% this year? Our business leaders are like, heck yes, how? And
here's Perko.
I'm going to tell you, right? I'm going to tell you. So can we go to the next slide? Okay, so the dimensions of accessibility, right? There are, when people say accessibility, they think we only mean digital accessibility. That is what we tend to mean because we all stare at a screen all day. But it also is just the way your company works. And ironically, as your company is more accessible, it's actually better for everybody. Like many of you know Alan Chai at Schlumberger. He had built an app that does some fundraising thing. It was a power app, and it helped business division leaders compete with each other for who's raising the most fund for like their give campaign, their annual charity drive thing. So each of the business leaders had their own little dashboard on like this app that ran on a phone. And all of the business leaders said, this font is so tiny, it's so hard to read. Nobody said they have accessibility needs, but he made like a big font button and all of them used it except for one, because he said, wow, business leaders are inherently getting older and no one has his eyes as good as they used to be. See me, see most of us. And all of them appreciated having the bigger font option. So while no one stated an accessibility need by implementing accessibility, it just became better for everybody, which I thought was a very fascinating story. And he came and unprompted told me this. I'm like, that story is going in slides, my friend. So all of the things that accessibility can cover. Okay. So first is how people get around just like an organization. How does it work? Like physically into the building, physically even into your, how people sign up for, what is the word? Apply for jobs on the job site. We've heard many job sites are extremely inaccessible. We're like, how are you planning to get the best candidates if you make it hard for them? The kinds of locations and types of work, right? If there's not an easy way for someone in a wheelchair to get through the hallways, that's not helpful and it's not good. The tools, the systems and tech that companies expect people to use. So this would be the internal products and internal tools. We've seen a lot of companies not prioritizing them, but then we're saying like, you are just keeping your employees from being productive. So that's less good. And that's not a good thing to do. The way information is presented. To me, this is a big one because I know a lot of people who like to receive a slide deck before the meeting because then they can process it on their own. And it's something I try to do when it's a smaller group meeting, because I know I've got people who are low vision, who are blind, who are colorblind, dyslexic, have ADHD, all of these things where they would just prefer to receive that information and follow along separately rather than trying to follow along with what's on the screen. You can all see me struggling to read the slide, right? Like I barely know what it says. And mostly it's because it takes me like solidly 1 minute to read each of these things. And then there's decisions around how to work, right? One of the big things is this whole return to work thing. It's interesting because I get it, camaraderie in the hallways. I'm an in-person person. If you ask me, do you prefer to work at home or work in the office? I'm going to say in the office. But I know that is not the case for everybody because a lot of people do need deep focus time. A lot of people have just basic physical needs that make it hard for them to go drive 30 miles to the office every day. And it's really, really important for your organization to have an accommodations process that makes sense for people. And even if you change it to be, rather than come in 3 days a week, let's plan 3 days a quarter where everybody is in. That way it's not like, oh, everyone's in or people are in, I'm doing air quotes, but half the people are still on calls all day. So on our team, one of the things that we started doing that I quite liked is just having the team get together twice a year. Everyone is there on campus. And Eddie, what did you think of that compared to like coming in 3 days a week here and there and half the people are not there?
No, I mean, I absolutely love the team, and our team is global. So, I mean, we have folks, in the UK, Paris, all over the US. And so, most all we do is virtual meetings. I'm on the East Coast side, and not many folks from my team, local team, are here locally. And so the office isn't necessarily the best place, but the commute is rough. I've had back surgery, and so it makes it very difficult to kind of go back to Donna's point earlier, where is it, having those accommodations really comes in handy. But yeah, the twice a year thing is absolutely great because I think it does give those of us who are kind of disconnected physically from the team a chance to get face to face, and I think it's good to build that kind of team camaraderie.
Absolutely. And one thing we found is that it's actually kind of funny because I go into the office and no one's there or no one's available to do this mysterious hallway thing, because we've gotten into Teams culture first. And even if my peers and I are all there, we wind up doing a Teams call because of the one person who's not there. So that's why I'm a fan of flexible work, or hybrid work, whatever it's called, where you gather like swarm a few times a year or a few times a month or whatever, rather than trying to peanut butter it like, okay, come in 3 any random days a week. I find that to be random. So anyway, recruiting, the practice. As you're hiring, just put on your website, we're happy to provide the following accommodations. That is it. Whether you're recruiting for a job or you're organizing a conference, just put it on your website. because it really makes things obvious to people what is available. One of the things we've seen companies do is they're not clear about what is available. So people don't know what they can ask for. So if you do have sign language services, which you might not, add that to your website. If you do have captions, which all of you do because you've got Teams, you can have captions in Teams, in Windows, or in PowerPoint, right? So just say captions are available in many different languages. Just let us know what you need. If you need the content sent to you beforehand, just put what is available on the site. It's been a game changer for us once we started doing that. And then the access to, meetings, training courses, etc., in a way that people can consume it. And that means something really basic, running accessibility checker on your document or on your PowerPoint. So really simple, straightforward. You can see that these are not expensive. It's just taking 5 minutes to be thoughtful and saying, oh, how will someone receive this? Next one. All right. So Eddie, do you want to go through this one? Because he's deep in the accessibility maturity scale.
Yeah. So, and again, this is a very good example of a high level maturity, right? And as they talked to earlier, you're starting at 100. You really don't know what you're doing. You haven't gotten started. You're really just trying to figure out, what does accessibility mean? How do we do this? And this goes back to where you want to start looking, where we talked earlier about, hey, let's get that executive sponsorship, right? Once you have that sponsorship and that buy-in, then you can start moving up, right? Start thinking about level 200. Let's start meeting the needs of our staff, right? So what does that mean? Meeting the needs of our staff. Well, you think about things like your tooling that your employees use on a day-to-day basis. Donna mentioned earlier the expense report tool, I think, or the time reporting tool, whichever one it was. They're both, needed by everybody. All your employees need to track their time off. They need to file their expenses. These are critical things. So focusing on how your tools rank on accessibility, what tools you have, right? Build your inventory. This is where you really want to start building your inventory of all of your tooling, all of your products, all of your buildings. All of those things, those physical things that Donna had mentioned earlier, like, do our buildings have tactile pathways that help guide folks that are blind, et cetera. And then, also look at what assistive technology that you have. As you start getting these things together and getting them out there, you'll move up, right? So now you're starting to say, okay, hey, we have defined standards. These are the things that we expect to meet accessibility needs. We have a good inventory of our tools, where our developers are starting to build accessibility into their products earlier on versus, sorry, my monitor just blacked out on me, earlier on until or before it gets into the deployment process, right? So we want to start thinking, we call it shift left, right? So you think about it, we've done some studies in the past that show there's a significant cost reduction in identifying accessibility bugs and issues earlier on in the process versus after you've deployed it, right? So if you think about it in the design phase, as you start identifying those things, fixing it, and go, oh, this button we want to put over here, we need to make sure that it has the right labels. We need to make sure the color contrasts are good. We can fix this ahead of time. So when that developer's coding it, they code it correctly from the get-go, right? That may cost you $10 to address that in design. As you get on into deployment, it could end up costing you $10,000 after you've already rolled that tool out, because now you have to stop the work that you're doing, have your developers go back and retroactively fix that bug, do all the regression testing, make sure you didn't cause more issues. So it can be extremely expensive, right? So as you move up to like level 300, you want to make sure that you're starting to move from things that you're rolling out further over to the left of the development process. Also think about your documentation and your communications, right? You want to make sure you have standards and processes around accessibility checks, right? And so we have several tools obviously built into our products to help you make sure that your documents are accessible. Accessibility checker is in most all of our Office products, I believe now. PowerPoint. There's a lot of good stuff going there. And then of course, as Donna mentioned, with the AI coming along, there are potentially some more improvements and things you could do there to help. And then, start thinking about how you're going to report things and track it. up to your leadership and give them that feedback on their buy-in and let them know how we're doing. Then as you move up again to level 400, accessibility at that point should be incorporated into everything you do. Your strategy, your mission, your operations, day-to-day work, everything should be there, right? And you have good measurements, reporting. There's ways that you could do things better. Think about usability testing, involving persons with disabilities in your development process and your review processes, right? There's a kind of saying that goes that's pretty popular in the community that says nothing for us without us, right? I believe is how it goes. So
nothing about us without us. Like don't make
nothing about us without us.
Yeah.
Right. And so you want to make sure that as you're doing things, you're including people with disabilities into your processes, right? You're going to have a better product. You're going to have better results. And again, it goes back to employee retention and productivity and increased revenue, right? So by the time you're at level 400, you should really start to see the benefits of and the rewards of what you've done. And then obviously level 500, which, as Donna mentioned earlier, I don't think there's anybody that's at that level 5 or level 500 on this chart that's really there worldwide, globally. I wish there were more. I wish we were there. We're working on it. We're getting there, but we're just not there yet. But yeah, that's the overall goal and is to try to get there.
Mm-hmm. One of the things we found very useful around the 300 level is systematizing things, because often it starts off as a passion project for someone, right? They were like, I'm passionate about this. And that's great, but passion runs out because they change jobs or they priority shift or whatever it is. So the more you put things into systems and processes, the more they stick. Like, for example, if you want to make accessible products, if that's what you're making, whatever spec you guys use to approve stuff, make sure there's an accessibility section. Add it. Just wherever there's security, add accessibility right before it, because you're not going to make a product without security. It's not happening. And I went through this exact same rigmarole with security. Back in 2010, when we said, oh, we want to put TFA on our products, it was the end of days. People are like, you can't make everyone go to their phone and sign in extra. Now, if there's a product without TFA, you freak out. Like, what kind of product is this? It's a disaster. So I believe in 10 years, we're going to get like that for accessibility. So the more we're ahead of the curve, the better. But put things into the existing processes that exist rather than making up a new process. For devs, we're trying to do a thing, running an experiment with our new compliance director to say, how can we put accessibility into the CI/CD process? So as part of pull requests, can I create a GitHub action for your pull request where it triggers a GitHub action like document your accessibility plan here, right? Or what is it? Or have you considered it? Or have you even had the conversation? And you have to attest, check yes or no, because it really is just shifting left, putting it at the forefront of people's minds. Because I have learned over the last 2.5 years, it's not that people don't want to do this. It's that they did not know, don't know how, or don't have time. It's one of these three things. I've met nobody who says, oh, accessibility is not important, I'm not going to do it because I don't feel like it. It's always, I don't know how to do it. Sorry, I don't have time. So let's eliminate those issues one at a time, because again, this is just a technical problem. It's not a societal, moral problem to solve. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, so these are the principles of accessibility and inclusive design, and there's something that the design community leans heavily on, and most of you probably already know these really well. And this is all about how information is processed, whether it's a UX or like a document or anything like that. The first one is perceivable. So how do people actually process the information that's in front of them, right? So this is, how can blind folk see this presentation? We are actively describing in words what's on this screen. We're not saying, okay, as you can see, there's 4 things on this page. We're not saying that. We're saying it's perceivable. Audio for those who can't hear. So if someone can't hear, what are we doing? We've got captions on in big letters. The chat is pretty active. How can it be consumable by people who may not have the same abilities as you and I, right? Like for dyslexic people, how are we consuming this? By reading it slowly and dramatically, that's how. The second one, operable. So how can people actually use something, right? Physically. First one is, how do you process? What are you even supposed to do? Second one is, how do you use it? So it's, rather than just having something have to be click-based or mouse-based, is there a voice activation? Is there a keyboard option, etc.? I never like time limit things like, you have 3 seconds to complete this activity. How many of us fly into a panic like, oh my God, where's the button? Where's my credit card? Where's this? Where's that? It doesn't do anything good. It causes a bit of angst. It's actually a mental health issue. So rather than enforcing weird fake time limits on things, just give people the time they need to do something. Also, timeouts suck, because we know it's 2023. We know how to do things without a timeout, unless it's actually a secure action. We should get rid of all sorts of things like that and stop designing those into our products, because no one likes them. Offer second chances, and offer ways that people can go back without losing all of their data from this page. I still see websites where if you go back, you lose all the data. Like, bad. Third thing is understandable. So do people know what they're supposed to be doing? That I found to be very fascinating, especially on travel websites. You go, you're like, where Delta Airlines actually is a shitty website. I'm a huge Delta fan, but if you go to the website, you have no idea where you're supposed to put the from or the to. I'm like, where do I put it? Where do I put it? And it's at the top in some control that doesn't look like any other input box on the planet. There's no box. It's like a field that's transparent. And I'm thinking, what? So I use the mobile app all the time to book things, because the website's just like, no, unusably bad. And I've given them lots of feedback. So it's, do people know what they're supposed to be doing? Because if your design is so clever and so beautiful that people can't figure out how to do it, that's not good, because the whole point is that people get through your flow or your process. And the fourth one is, so people can choose what they need to do the job, right? Give people the job to be done, give them the tools that they can use to do it. So websites should work well enough that people who say are colorblind or blind or dyslexic can actually use it. Colorblindness, honestly, is a huge thing that people just don't talk enough about. I see lots of dudes on this call. 1 in 12 of you are colorblind, and many of you may not even know it. And that is the funniest thing of all about accessibility and disability. Many of these invisible disabilities, like colorblindness, hard of hearing, dyslexia, ADHD, they're invisible. We were not diagnosed, so we don't even know we have it. You may think you're seeing the world as it is, but you might actually be colorblind. I didn't know I was dyslexic till I was 32 years old. So that is the thing about this last one, robust. Offer more options, because then people can choose what works for them without any labels. Okay. And then next slide, Sharon. So this is the resources. And Eddie, do you mind showing that thing you made for Ignite? The 5 things you can do today?
Yeah, let me see. Pull that one up.
Yeah. So at Ignite,
that slide that you talking about the one where we had the features you can enable today?
Yeah, the 5 things you can turn on today.
Let me see if I can share just the screen.
While he's pulling that up, I basically just grabbed resources that I knew made sense, and Donna has a fabulous list, so that's on the top. And then I just added a few like industry compliant type things that if you guys wanted to learn more about, you can click on those as well.
Come on, Teams, you could work for me this morning. Having Teams issues. It's loading. Present in Teams.
I have a funny story for you. So my old boss, Bill, I was presenting an accessibility plan to him. This is years ago, probably a decade ago. And he said, oh, I don't know if we're going to have time to get to accessibility this round. And I said, oh, well, check out the heat map. We're really close on these features. These are the product features that are accessible and which are not. So I bring up this red-green heat map, okay? And he looks at me and says, I just don't know how many people accessibility touches. I'm like, oh, it touches a lot more than you think. He's like, what are you showing me here? I'm like, oh, red and green showing where we've made progress. He's like, Donna, I'm colorblind. I have no idea what red and green are. I'm crying, laughing. And people are like, Bill, focus, my friend. He's like, is that accessibility? He's Australian, real Australian. It was very funny. I was dying. I'm like, guy, please work with me.
All right, so hopefully everyone can see the slide now. So yeah, here's a few things that you can do today, and actually there's probably, because this was from our presentation last year, and I think we probably could add a handful more on here now, but there are several accessibility features you can go out today and enable across several of our products, like Windows focus sessions and live captions. Live captions is one of my favorite. In Windows, the focus session I don't use as much. I probably should start using it more. So if you're not familiar with those, there's plenty of articles on it, or feel free to reach out to me and I can kind of go over in detail. I want to be cognizant of time here. Teams, there's presenter view, which I'm using right now. There's also captions in Teams, which I will tell you, I'm one of those folks that as I am aging, my hearing is progressively getting worse, and I use the captions more and more, mainly because of my many years of DJing. I've destroyed my hearing, but record and transcribe. I don't know if folks here on the call are using this today. Absolutely one of my favorites. It has allowed me to focus more on my calls, to pay attention to what's going on, be more engaged in the conversation, and not worry about trying to jot down notes. Just record the meetings, go back, review the captions, and the AI functionality that's built in there today, which is being worked on and improved constantly, we'll go back and recap your meetings for you. So use that recap function. Again, Edge, we at Ignite last year launched live captions in Edge, page colors and automated image descriptions. There's a link there, aka.ms Edge for everyone, with the video that our coworker Ann has done with the Edge team that kind of goes over some of those things. Outlook, there's a few there as well. Send after vacation, which is another good. Start meetings later. Use this all the time. I automatically set my meetings to start 5 minutes after. This is really important for hybrid meetings because you have some folks that are in office and they need that 5 minutes to get from one meeting to the next. I think the pandemic has caused us all to think we can just hang up and go immediately to the next meeting, and we kind of forget about those that are back in the office that are going on there. And of course, accessibility checker. And then the last one, GitHub Copilot. Don, I'm going to let you talk about this one because I know this one's very near and dear to your heart as an engineer and a developer. So I'll let you talk about GitHub.
So, I, of course, am a huge fan of GitHub Copilot. It was the first Copilot. It's been out for 2 years. And I've been talking about it for so long. People are like, oh, is that thing you said years ago? I'm like, thank you. But GitHub Copilot, of course, finishes your code for you. But if you haven't tried GitHub Copilot X, go sign up for that, because that gives you the chat on the side where you can ask questions like, what does this code even mean? Or generate me 10 test cases. I like saying, generate 10 accessibility test cases for this chunk of code and tell me how to fix it. Yeah, that's right. I make this thing do my work for me. I have no issues with that. And my boss like, you are so good at this. I'm like, I know, really good at this. So I do believe AI is one of the best accessibility tools on the planet. There's two things that I love a lot. Teams Recap. I know it's a premium feature, but it's great. We use it all the time and it's really accurate in giving you the meeting summary notes. And I like the annotations. It'll say, here are all the times someone called you out, Donna, in a meeting. So remember what you did. But if you haven't used it, go use it. Even if you just try it for a month, it has really changed the way I do meetings. I record all meetings. I was in a room with 4 people the other day and they were like, can we record this so we can get the Teams Recap? I'm like, you know that you've arrived when random nerds are like, can we use this feature that has nothing to do with this? We were like, I feel like we need an actual feature for in-person meetings that just records on your phone that generates your recap at this point. So then I hit up the Teams team, like, is this a thing? They were like, that is such an interesting idea. I said, if you're going to have in person, this is fascinating. So it's just one of those features that I can't believe I used to live without it. And GitHub Copilot's the second one. All right. So that's the content we had today. Do we have any questions? I know it's like pretty close to the end and but we had a lot of information to bring.
Awkward silence.
Awkward silence.
The deck that I had, no, it is not publicly available. Sorry.
Eddie, what you can do is probably grab your resources slide and jam it into theirs.
I was just thinking we could drop it in if we had the link, but if it's not available.
Yeah,
Because-
no, it's not. There's some additional content in there that
Sure.
that
That I
our manager
can't-
will murder us for. But I
Yeah.
think you can take your resources slide and throw that in there.
yeah, no, I think
Yeah,
we
if
can
you
do
wouldn't
that.
mind, that'd be great.
Is there something, Mark, that you particularly were interested in seeing in that? Was it just a list of things?
Just that one slide that you just
Yeah.
went through, I think the
Okay.
5 things that you can
Yeah.
do, that would be great to put in here.
Yeah, I could
That
just
would be
drop that
ideal.
slide in chat and I could do that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
let's
Andrew,
see.
the Accenture study is available. If you look up Accenture accessibility study 2018, I think you'll find it. It's one of those huge ass documents that took me a day and a half to read, but
Yeah,
it's a really
it's
good
large.
study. It's a big study, but they studied 500 companies, and it was very fascinating.
So speaking of companies, real quick, I'm going to throw this out here, another stat, because you know me, I like numbers. So
Yeah.
did you realize that only 40% of the major companies out there today have an accessibility program? Only 40%.
Ooh, I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah, it's only 40%. Just something to think about. You know, we need to get that number up.
Yeah, we do. I think a lot of people are just afraid of it. They were like, well, none of us are experts. I'm like, do Eddie and I look like experts? No, we're not. We're not from accessibility world. We don't have certifications. We don't know. We're not screen readers by design. But do we know how to set up a program in a company that solves a problem? Yes, we do. I think of accessibility as a tech problem. I want people to get out of this idea that it's some like moral or ethical question. It's like, no, do you want more employees to do things? Yes or no? It's the same as if you have employees who live in a place without good bandwidth. What do? Have better bandwidth and just like have better systems for people who live in a place without good bandwidth. It's not like is this a good thing to do for the world thing? It's just a basic business problem to solve. So that's why, I think we need more people like all of you who are not from the accessibility world to help solve these issues in your organization, because most of it really is just common sense. It's like, here's a problem, here's a potential solution. Let's all try it and see if it works.
Simon, you had a question?
Yeah, as it happens, I put a thing in the chat. I'm running a session with Simon Doyle this evening in our user group around using AI to generate video from, written content. So I'm interested to know, in your experience, because I don't suffer from dyslexia, but I know many people who do, how important is video then as their alternative way of conveying information? I've always assumed it's a millennial thing, but I'm kind of my big aha from this is no, maybe this is a really big important tool for all people inside organisations and elsewhere. So, what's your take on video?
Video is a game changer for dyslexic people, right?
Yeah.
Because rather than having to read this entire blog post, you kind of hear about it and you get the different, what is that thing called where you receive information in different ways? Whatever it's called, that thing. So the more ways people have to receive information, the better. So the reason I say put captions on your video all the time is because the current generation of people have grown up with captions on everything. Their kids' TV shows on their iPads, everything comes with captions. And it's been actually shown in studies. Look up that website called turnonthecaptions.com or turnonthesubtitles.com. It's some huge movement that show like kids who watch stuff with subtitles learn to read like twice as fast. And people who also are learning a foreign language, if they do stuff with captions in that language, they learn it twice as fast because your brain is just processing the information in 2 ways rather than just seeing it in 1 way. So it's just all up good. And what I do is I just say like, I am going to turn on captions. If this is distracting to you, let me know. I have PowerPoint captions on permanently in all of my presentations. And the number of people who've come up to me and said, thank you for doing that is a lot. And they weren't folks who are deaf. There are people who might be sitting in the back, might be speaking another language, might just need like the 2 levels of focus. So I turn it on for 100% of my presentations. That checkbox stays checked. If you don't know where it is, if you go to slideshow, go all the way to the right, just check, turn on subtitles, and you can choose the language. I change it based on the country I'm in. And I'm actually doing an accessibility training to the Power Platform Conference people tomorrow, Thursday, whatever day Thursday is, to just say, turn this on and keep it on forever, change language and turn it off only if people ask you to.
So my follow-up question is, I tend not to consume stuff via video. It's too slow, and I've got to pay attention. I much rather read than video because of the speed of information acquisition. But podcasts, audio, I can do while doing other things. So my sort of follow-up question is, what about audio instead of video? Is that as good for people in this case?
I think it is. I find audio to be very useful for, again, like when I'm doing something else. When I'm driving or walking on the treadmill, I consume a lot of podcasts. And I especially like that I can consume it at 1.5 speed. Okay, so funny story. I told my colleague Anne, she's a screen reader user. She's like the most famous blind person on the planet, right? I'm like, Anne, guess what? I'm consuming podcasts at 1.5. I think I can get 1.7 and maybe even 2. She laughs at me and laughs and laughs and laughs. And I said, what? And she said, my screen reader is at 6. I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
I was a badass for a second. And she's like, how do you read so slowly? I'm like, thanks, Anne, for your amazingly supportive. It was great. It was a great conversation. We're all crying.
Anne is superhuman. Anne is superhuman.
Amazing people. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for being with us, and go forth and do the thing. Don't be afraid of talking about accessibility in your org, because Eddie and I knew absolutely nothing 2.5 years ago, and now we can go give spiels on this all over the world. So go forth, do the thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much for being here and joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
See ya.
Bye.